Hey guys, tonight we sink into the feather-stuffed mattress of a rented upstairs room in 18th century Ireland, where the ceilings are low, the chamber pots are full, and the secrets press against the wallpaper like damp stains that just won't fade. It's raining, obviously. A gray, relentless drizzle that slicks the cobblestone streets and forces you, traveler, into the warm thug of a boarding house that smells like overboiled cabbage, cheap tallow candles, and something sweeter, maybe. Lavender perfume, or maybe that bottle of laudanum someone spilled under the stairs last month. The hallway groans as you step in. You're not alone. You're never alone. Each creak in the floorboards might be a lonely poet, a drunken footman, or a very married guest slipping out of the wrong room with their wig in hand and shame trailing like a badly tied cravat. Welcome to the soft scandals of Irish boarding. Houses where the sex is usually off book, the scandals come with tea, and the bedsheets remember everything. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from, and what time your night's just gotten interesting. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge up the narrow staircase behind a matron in a tea-stained bonnet. She doesn't ask your name. She asks how long you're staying. That depends, you mumble. She nods with the grim understanding of someone who's heard that answer 100 times and has washed it out of 50 sets of linen. Your room is at the top. The bed is lumpy. The hearth has just enough coal to seem apologetic, and the wallpaper peels back to reveal centuries of smoke, secrets, and mildew. Someone scratched a poem into the windowpane with a diamond ring, either a romantic farewell or a passive-aggressive review. This isn't the kind of place anyone plans to die in, but a few have tried, and one or two have disappeared. Historians still argue whether boarding houses were a necessary evil in the explosion of Irish urban life, or just a clever way to warehouse sin with complimentary breakfast. Either way, this one's full tonight. The hallway pulses with muffled laughter and doors quietly clicking shut. You hear a couple arguing in the room beside you. Something about a letter. Something about a necklace. Something about whose baby it is, though neither of them seem like the diapering type. There's a rustle, a thud, then sudden silence, followed by a man humming as he descends the stairs alone. You peer through your keyhole. Nothing, just the hallway. Just the candle flickering. Just Mrs. Doolin's cat licking something suspicious from the carpet. No one talks about what happens in boarding houses, not officially. But if you stay long enough, the walls whisper. Like the time a well-known magistrate came to town and checked into a respectable lodging on Essex Street. Said he wanted peace and quiet. Instead, he was seduced by the landlady's daughter, who, as it turns out, was also her niece. The arrangement was so cozy it ended in what local newspapers called a compromise succession and a minor scandal about who was inheriting which tea service. That's the thing with these houses. They breathe. They adapt. They seduce. One night you're sipping weak tea and minding your own business. The next, you're playing footsie with someone whose name you'll forget by morning, but whose mole placement you'll remember forever. Take the case of a traveling fiddler, real name lost to time, who spent a fortnight in a coastal boarding house and managed to share a bed with both the cook and the curate's daughter without either knowing. Or maybe they did know. The maid swore he played better after each conquest, and the room he rented was permanently labeled Fiddler's Hollow, until it burned down in 1792, possibly on purpose. Fringe detail of the night? Some boarding houses offered discounts for repeat companions. Not officially, of course, but a smile from the right landlady and a tip to the night porter could get your favorite widow's room scheduled right next to yours. A perk if you didn't snore. Or if you did, but she liked the rhythm. And amid all this, sex was less about passion and more about politics, especially for women. in places where inheritance laws were cruel jokes and husbands frequently vanished. Into drink, war, or debtor's prison. A well-timed boarding fling could mean survival. Take Margaret O'Hara, for example. She arrived in Dublin with nothing but a lace parasol and a letter of recommendation she wrote herself. Within 6 months, she'd negotiated 3 lodging arrangements with respectable men, each of whom thought he was her one and only patron. By the time she disappeared, some say to France, others say to prison, she had more leverage than half the Irish House of Commons. The mattress under you creaks. It's probably just the springs. Or a mouse. Or the ghost of someone who didn't pay their rent. You wonder if the door locks properly. It doesn't. You consider jamming a chair under the knob, but then remember that earlier joke from the chambermaid. If they want in love, they usually find a way, and if you want them in, the handle turns easier. She'd winked, you laughed, but now it feels less funny. Downstairs, the mutton stew is being ladled into chipped bowls, the kind that were probably elegant 30 years ago before being repurposed for nightly drama and accidental poisonings only. Once, but the rumor still lingers like the scent of burnt onions. You descend the stairs slowly, ducking beneath the low beam that once knocked a visiting French poet unconscious. The common room is warm, overly so, and the windows are fogged with breath and spilled broth. It's not exactly cheerful, but there's a rhythm to it, a clatter of spoons and murmured pleasantries that hides the strange economy bubbling just beneath. Because dinner here is never just dinner, it's the audition, the soft sales pitch, the main stage. Landladies scan the room like generals surveying the battlefield. Widows dab their lips with lace-trimmed napkins, while locking eyes with young tenants who forgot to button their waistcoats properly. Elbows brush by accident or on purpose. There's a toast. Someone jokes about the butter being from last month's cow. Laughter, then silence as Mr. Keating, a thin man with excellent sideburns and a questionable limp, asks Miss Devlin if she'd be needing help lighting her fire tonight. She blushes. She's not used to blushing. Last week she threw a slipper at a constable, but the room notices. A nod, a ripple. The arrangement has begun. See, every meal is also a marketplace, but instead of currency, it trades in glances. Gloved hands resting too long on chair backs, and cryptic references to reading aloud in the sitting room. Some call it charming, some call it survival. Either way, it's baked into the pudding. One maid, Ellen, once said the mashed turnips knew more than any priest ever would. That same week, she ran off with a retired actor who claimed to be the illegitimate son of a viscount. Historians still argue whether she loved him or just wanted out of doing laundry in a house with 23 stairs and no railing. A detail: the kitchen has 2 spice racks, one for cooking and one for courtship. The second contains cloves, rose water, and a mysterious vial labeled "only if desperate." Then there's the curious case of Mr. and Mrs. Talbot. They arrived separately, booked rooms on opposite ends of the hall, and pretended not to know each other for 3 days straight. Every evening they'd dine with strangers, exchanging mild observations about the rain, the state of the roads, or the increasingly ridiculous price of good lace. On the 4th night, a note passed hands under the table. On the 5th, someone forgot to close a door. By the 6th, the landlady had doubled their rent, citing moral exposure. They paid it without complaint and stayed another month, proving once again that Irish boarding houses didn't just tolerate scandal, they billed for it. There's a fringe detail that makes the rounds when the stew is too watery and conversation needs spicing. A particularly creative boarding mistress in Galway reportedly hosted sleep raffles, where guests paid a penny to enter and winners got a night with the room and the company of their choice. It was all very hush-hush, supposedly for charity, though no one ever clarified which charity. The practice was outlawed eventually, but only after a bishop lost 5 shillings and his composure in a very public row over a missing cravat and a midwife named Nora. Tonight, your stew is salty, the bread is stale, but the drama? Perfectly fresh. You spot a note being tucked under a napkin. A smile passed across a table like contraband. And over near the fireplace, a gentleman with nicotine-stained fingers is playing a slow, lilting tune on a penny whistle, his eyes fixed not on the notes, but on a widow wearing too much rouge and not enough shame. You wonder if he's really playing for her, or if she's already made other arrangements. Chances are, someone's already paid for the room next to hers. Maybe she threw that raffle herself. You never know. The sex story of the night? Let's talk about the case of Bridget Malone, a boarding housemaid with ambitions far exceeding her station and an uncanny ability to quote Ovid. She seduced a guest from London, a courtier with gout and a fondness for port, by reading Latin poetry to him while changing his linens. Their affair lasted precisely 12 days, during which she kept a detailed journal, noting everything from the frequency of his foot rub requests to his peculiar preference for wearing a powdered wig in bed. When he left, she published the journal under a pseudonym. It sold out in Dublin twice. She used the proceeds to buy the boarding house she once cleaned. And yes, she kept the bed. Now your bowl is empty and the room feels too full. You excuse yourself, but not before catching the landlady watching you just for a second, just long enough to wonder if you're now part of someone else's unfolding intrigue, or worse, her own. Upstairs, the hallway is darker than before. The lamp oil is running low, or maybe it's just the hour. You pass room 6, where someone is whispering. You hear a giggle, and then the sound of a cork popping. Not wine, laudanum. The mix of pleasure and pain here is like that. Medicinal, precise, sometimes fatal. And as you slip back into your room, stomach full, curiosity piqued, and heart racing just a little too much, you realize something else. This isn't a place you simply stay in. It's a place that stays in you. You're jolted awake at midnight, not by a scream or a crash, but by silence. Thick, humid silence. The kind that sits on your chest like a judgmental ant. The fire has burned down to an orange eye, half-lidded and suspicious, watching you sweat beneath blankets that smell like dust and dried lavender. And then, the unmistakable sound. A creak, soft and deliberate, from the back staircase. The one servants use when they're not supposed to be seen. Or the one priests use when they are. You slide out of bed, careful not to let the floor betray you, and move toward the door, pressing your eye to the keyhole. All you see is a shadow gliding past, tall, robed, and barefoot. You recognize the gait, not because you've seen it before, but because something in your bones insists, this man isn't lost. He's returning. Welcome to the other side of boarding house life, the part where sacred robes sweep across unsacred floors, and virtue is just a candle that's burned too low. You follow silently to the landing. There's a half door most guests never notice, half hidden behind a faded tapestry of St. Bridget that hasn't seen reverence in years. It opens with a reluctant sigh, revealing narrow stairs slick with age and the occasional drop of candle wax. These stairs lead to the priest's quarters, or so it was said. But no priest has been assigned to this house in decades. Officially, that is. Unofficially, the place has always had its shepherds. Only they tend to their flock one body at a time. Downstairs again, you find a side hallway you didn't know existed. It smells of incense and something faintly metallic, blood, perhaps, or old holy water. A door swings open ahead of you, and there she is, a young woman, no older than 20, wrapped in a lace nightgown that seemed too many washings and not enough consent. She's holding a letter. She doesn't see you. She steps into the room with the priest, and the door closes with the softness of a promise being broken for the 100th time. You don't move. You don't breathe. You just wonder how many confessions start like this. How many absolutions are traded for moans instead of prayers. There's a story still whispered in some corners of County Clare, About a boarding house that doubled as a sanctuary for priests during the penal laws. But the sanctuary, it turned out, had velvet curtains, perfumed beds, and a guest book that included more aliases than a French spy ring. One priest, Father A, was known for conducting early morning masses and late-night moral consultations, sometimes with the same woman. When a jealous suitor confronted him, he reportedly offered to bless the man's fists before their duel. Historians still argue whether he died honorably in that duel or escaped to Spain with his favorite parishioner and a stolen relic. Either way, the house caught fire 2 weeks later, and the relic was never found. Fringe detail? Some Irish boarding houses installed hidden prayer closets that were really just escape tunnels, first for political reasons, then personal ones. One especially well-hidden panel led not to the street, but to the cellar of a neighboring pub, where secrets were exchanged over porter and the occasional knee beneath the table. By the 1780s, the priest hole had become a euphemism, and not a polite one. Tenants whispered about taking the holy route when referring to affairs with clergymen, which could mean anything from a discreet backroom tryst to an arrangement involving weekly donations and freshly baked soda bread. Your own boarding house has no such tunnel. Or maybe it does, and you just haven't found the right wall to knock on yet. But tonight, it's not the architecture that fascinates, it's the theater of it all. The way shame performs itself in whispers and glances. The way people cling to ritual while undressing behind thin doors. You pass a Bible left open in the hallway, as if to remind whoever reads it that salvation is only ever a room away. But you also pass a pair of gloves, delicate, ivory-colored, and far too feminine to belong to the priest. They're resting on the railing, forgotten or maybe placed deliberately, like a dare dot. And then the sex story of the hour. A bishop's nephew, freshly graduated from seminary and sent to oversee spiritual health in a busy Dublin lodging house. He took the role seriously at first, but within weeks he was writing devotional poetry to a tenant named Chauban, who had a collection of erotic French novels and an allergy to self-restraint. They began exchanging psalms with hidden annotations, sometimes in lemon juice, revealed only when held to candlelight. Their affair culminated in an attempt to flee to the continent, disguised as traveling musicians. It failed spectacularly, but their love letters, once discovered, were published privately and are still traded in rare book circles as the Psalms of Sin. Back in your room, you lie awake, the mattress no more comfortable but now seemingly alive with whispers. You think about what you saw, or think you saw. The priest, the girl, the gloves. Maybe none of it matters. Maybe everything does. In a house like this, the sacred and profane live in the same corridor. You close your eyes, hoping sleep will be dreamless. But instead, your last thought before drifting off is a line someone muttered earlier over stew and butter. We all kneel eventually, love. It just depends who's watching. You wake late, disoriented, mouth dry, and every bone in your body announcing itself like it's owed something. The fire's gone cold, the windows fogged, and your boots are exactly where you left them, except one is suspiciously damp. Don't ask. You shuffle downstairs, half expecting the dining room to be empty, but instead, it's louder than ever. Laughter, dice clattering on a tabletop, the unmistakable pop of corks, and the rustle of lace meeting polished waistcoat. It's not breakfast, it's theater. And the boarding house is hosting a matinee of indulgence you weren't invited to, but no one's stopping you from watching. This morning belongs to the widows. Not the kind in black lace weeping into lace handkerchiefs. No, these widows drink brandy in the morning and keep ledgers tighter than their corsets. They know the name of every man in this house, his debts, his favorite drink, and exactly how long he's likely to live. Their rooms smell like violets and vinegar, and their reputations depend on appearing uninterested while orchestrating everything. Take Mrs. Halpin, seated by the window in a plum, Gown 2 years out of fashion, which makes it fashionable again. She's sipping coffee laced with something much stronger and watching a pair of young gentlemen wager over a game of cards. The one in the navy waistcoat, no older than 23 and currently losing, sneaks a glance at her every third. Shuffle. He's playing to impress. Not the other players, but her. Because here's the truth no one tells you. In these houses, love is rarely about hearts. It's about leverage. And the top floor doesn't go to whoever pays the most. It goes to whoever plays the game best. Mrs. Halpin hasn't had to pay rent in 4 years. The other widow, Mrs. Morrissey, leans in close to her opponent and whispers something. He laughs. She smiles. A coin disappears beneath the table. 2. Shoes follow. It's not even noon. You're starting to understand that in the world of Irish boarding houses, the concept of time is more of a suggestion. Affairs rise and fall with the tides of tea service, and no one bats an eye when a tenant moves rooms for light reasons, a euphemism meaning anything from bedbugs to broken engagements. Fringe detail for you, some tenants actually created a scoring system for romantic entanglements. Westcat wagers, they were called. Dandies and libertines, men who read too much Byron and drank too much port, would bet on everything from how many buttons it took to undo someone's bodice to which room would host the next indiscretion. These bets were scribbled in coded notebooks and passed among the elite under the guise of poetry. One such ledger, found in a chimney during renovations in Cork, contained not only names and wagers but also detailed sketches, some accurate, some wildly optimistic. It now sits in a private collection titled The Gentleman's Folly, the most notorious story from this chapter. Enter Daniel Baird, heir to a shipping fortune and as emotionally stable as a sack of flour in a hurricane. He arrived in Dublin at 24, freshly disinherited for moral obscenities, and quickly found refuge in a boarding house run by a landlady with a soft spot for broken men. Within 2 weeks, he was involved with 3 women, 2 card games, and 1 lawsuit. His most scandalous conquest. Not a tenant, but a widow known only as the Canary due to her obsession with yellow silk. She was 10 years older, sharper than a guillotine blade, and fond of wagering her undergarments in public chess games. Their affair ended when she won his boots in a bet, and he had to limp barefoot to the magistrate's office to declare bankruptcy. They say she still wears the boots when the mood strikes. Historians still argue whether these women were liberated survivors or cunning predators, whether they subverted the rigid constraints of marriage and patriarchy or simply played the same game with sharper knives. But if you ask the chambermaids, who wash their linens and hear them cry when the brandy runs dry, the answer's probably both. The energy in the room changes just before noon. A delivery arrives, a case of wine for the lady upstairs with no name attached. Everyone knows who it's for. Everyone pretends not to. You climb the stairs, glancing at doorways, some open, some suspiciously ajar. There's a card game continuing in room 7, complete with shouted insults and the smell of pipe tobacco and wounded pride. But the real intrigue is at the end of the hall, where the widow in yellow, yes, that widow sits with her legs crossed, reading a newspaper upside down, daring the world to correct her. And the mood? Electric, because this house, like so many others, thrives not on decorum but on potential chaos. Every door is a question. Every cough is a cue. Every knock could be opportunity or revenge. The boarding house doesn't care. It adapts. It eats reputations like breakfast and spits out legends before supper. You retreat to your room. Your tea is cold. Your boots are still damp. But your ears are burning with names you were never supposed to hear and the distant echo of dice deciding someone's next move. You wonder if anyone's betting on you yet. You're halfway through tying your cravat when you hear the first shout, sharp, male, and carrying the particular pitch of someone who just realized he's been had. Not robbed. Worse, romantically repositioned. You open your door just enough to glimpse the scene. A young man in last season's coat, hair tousled from sleep or heartbreak, standing in the hall barefoot and trembling, a sheet wrapped around him like a toga of regret. Behind him, the door to room 3 slams shut. A click of the lock. Final. And from the keyhole, the unmistakable scent of rosewater and triumph. That's the thing about Irish boarding houses. Sometimes you check in looking for a bed and end up in a plot twist. You dress quickly and quietly, because you've now learned the hard way that privacy here is fiction. This place is a labyrinth of eyes behind lace curtains, of rumors so fresh they haven't even happened yet. And as you pass the poor barefoot lad pacing and muttering about dowries and deception, you remind yourself of a local saying: every floorboard here has heard a proposal and a lie. Sometimes in the same breath, the concept of lodger status gets complicated. One night in the wrong room or the right one, depending on your goals, and you might find yourself betrothed by morning, especially if the landlady has an interest in matchmaking or a nephew who needs a quick reputation fix. Welcome to the accidental husband clause. It's not written anywhere, but everyone knows it. Spend the night, be seen at breakfast, and someone's calling the parish priest. Faster than you can button your cuffs. There's a reason most guests carry false names and sleep in their boots. Take the infamous case of Churin Muldoon, a minor clerk with a major appetite for danger. He'd been staying in a respectable boarding house near Limerick when a storm trapped him indoors for 3 days. By the end of it, he'd shared a bed, a bath, and apparently a life plan with the landlady's daughter Orla, a woman described by neighbors as uncommonly persuasive. Whether Churin actually proposed is debated, but the announcement was posted anyway. He tried to flee. She beat him to the church. They married. A year later, she opened a rival boarding house across the street and started taking her mother's tenants. Historians still argue whether she loved him or just wanted his client list. Today, you catch a glimpse of the same strategy in motion at lunch, where a modest stew is served alongside not-so-modest negotiations. A girl with freckles and ribbon-tied braids sits suspiciously close to a retired pharmacist with trembling hands and a pocket full of coins. He's been in the house a week and hasn't yet figured out that her last 3 uncles were all other tenants with slightly different mustaches. She laughs at something he says, probably about herbal teas, and brushes imaginary lint off his shoulder. The dining room collectively holds its breath. Another engagement is brewing. Fringe detail of the day. Some houses employed what were euphemistically called room monitors older. Discreet tenants who received discounted rent in exchange for reporting on romantic entanglements. These were not moral enforcers, mind you. They were market analysts. Their notes helped the landlady price rooms accordingly. A scandalous room on the 2nd floor, that goes up in rent. A dull room with no drama, discounted for quiet students. It was all about asset management. One infamous monitor, Miss Doyle, once managed to engineer a 3-way lover's triangle just to bump her own room into a more expensive wing of the house. She never married, but she died with a full pension and an enviable collection of scandal-stained lace gloves. Your afternoon passes in observation. You sip lukewarm tea in the drawing room while reading an abandoned love letter tucked into a copy of Robinson Crusoe. It's addressed to no one, ends mid-sentence, and contains a crude sketch of what appears to be 2 intertwined swans, or possibly very confused ducks. The handwriting matches no one you've met, but the ink is fresh. You pocket it. Not because you're nosy, because you're now officially part of the house. And the sex story for this evening? Imagine a Scottish officer on leave, housed temporarily in a Dublin boarding house while awaiting new orders. He's arrogant, wealthy, and smells like cedarwood and betrayal. Within days he's sharing his room with a woman who claims to be a dance instructor, but whose idea of waltzing involves more unbuttoning than choreography. Their affair becomes the worst-kept secret in the neighborhood, complete with audible rehearsals and missing candles. It ends when his orders arrive and she, rather spectacularly, claims she's pregnant. He leaves anyway. She throws a party. The baby never appears, but a string of new lovers does, each more lavishly dressed than the last. She eventually buys the building. He dies in debt. Her name, no one remembers. Her nickname? Madame Encore. Night falls again, and the mood of the house shifts with the candlelight. Doors click softly shut. Boots tiptoe. A violin begins to play from somewhere above. It's a waltz, off-key, too fast. Someone's in love, or drunk, or both. You stay awake longer than usual, watching the ceiling flicker with shadows that move like dancers. This house, for all its creaks and scandal, has rhythm. And you've started to learn the steps. It starts with a flutter. Not in your chest, though that might come later. No, this flutter belongs to the laundry line stretched across the narrow backyard, quivering under the weight of bloomers, petticoats, and unspoken desires. There's something oddly poetic about it. The way linen sways like flirtation in the breeze, corsets flapping like tired hearts. You lean out your window and watch a pair of stockings perform a delicate waltz with the wind. But it's not the garments that catch your eye, it's the notes. Tiny slips of folded paper tucked into sleeves, pinned to apron ties, or sewn into hems, messages, love letters, warnings, sometimes even maps. The boarding house's backyard isn't just a place for drying clothes. It's a post office for the desperate, the daring, and the dangerously bored. You spot a flash of ink in the corner of a camisole and watch as a young boy, probably the stable hand, plucks it off like it's a leaf, folds it twice more, and disappears through the garden gate without looking back. Laundry day here is less about soap and more about secrets. Everyone participates, from maids to merchants to mysterious widows who somehow have more chemises than any one body could ever need. Each line is a web of intention, a daily performance of virtue fluttering in the open, while behind shuttered windows, bodies commit their usual quiet treasons. The messages aren't always romantic. Sometimes it's a warning about a jealous husband. Sometimes a coded note about meeting in the cellar after dark. Once, a full page torn from the Confessions of St. Augustine appeared pinned to a brassiere, underlined passages included. No one claimed it. Everyone read it. The brassiere, incidentally, was never seen again. Fringe detail of the week, certain. Boarding houses develop their own systems of laundry, punctuation. A red ribbon on a sleeve meant occupied tonight. A missing sock signaled interest. 2 aprons folded over the same line. That meant trouble or fun, depending on who you asked. It was a kind of Morse code of the flesh, understood only by those who knew where to look and who not to ask. And this wasn't some fleeting Dublin eccentricity. It spread like a fever across boarding homes in Cork, Kilkenny, even as far as Galway. There's even record of one landlady being fined after a priest found his silk chemise bearing a line from Ovid. "I burn. I consume. I long to be consumed." She claimed it was a laundry error. He requested the address of the wearer. Today, you find yourself drawn to the backyard, ostensibly to air out your socks, which have acquired a scent that suggests they've walked through more sins than streets. But mostly, you're hoping to see her again. The girl who hangs linens with one hand and writes with the other. She's quick, always glancing behind her, a piece of charcoal tucked behind her ear like a secret waiting to be drawn. You first noticed her yesterday when she pinned a skirt and a sonnet in the same motion. Now she stands there, smoothing out a blouse while whispering to a pigeon perched on the line like it's a co-conspirator. She doesn't look up. She doesn't need to. You're already caught. The house once hosted a pair of lovers who conducted their entire courtship through laundry messages. He was a clerk, proper and shy. She, a governess with a fondness for double entendres and blue ink. For weeks they Past notes inside socks, embroidered flirtations into handkerchiefs, and once exchanged confessions stitched into the lining of a petticoat. They never spoke aloud. Their first kiss happened in the broom closet, exactly 17 days after the first message. Their last? 3 minutes before her employer was arrested for embezzlement and the house was shut down. She disappeared. He wrote a pamphlet. It sold poorly, but remains a valuable reminder that sometimes love is better in footnotes. Today's sex story comes from Peter. Webb's delightful swamp of erotic history. A boarding house in Waterford that moonlighted as a poetry salon. One of the guests, an aspiring priest named Declan, had a secret life writing scandalous verse under the name The Scarlet Pen. One night, a verse slipped from his coat during supper and landed under the boot of Miss Rowena Fallon, a self-described spinster by choice, poet by spite. She read it. She laughed. She wrote her reply directly onto his cuff with soup spoon ink. Don't ask. And thus began a firestorm of nightly editing sessions. They met in the attic every Thursday, under the pretense of discussing meter. The landlady later claimed she thought poetic thrust was a theological term. When they were finally caught mid-stanza, Declan renounced his vows. Rowena published their collection, and it was banned in every county except Antrim, where it became a wedding gift staple for about 3 months. The sun dips lower, the clothesline dips with it. You take down your socks, but not before checking each item near yours. You find nothing. Not today. But the pigeon is still there, staring at you like it knows something. And maybe it does. This house doesn't give up its stories easily. But if you stay still, listen carefully, and fold your linens with enough devotion, it just might send one your way. By now you've grown used to the smell. A fusion of scorched porridge, old sherry, damp wool, and something faintly medicinal, camphor maybe. It clings to the staircase and seeps into the corners of your sleeves, a reminder that this house breathes through its mildew. But tonight, there's something else in the air. A scent like burnt beeswax and leather polish, mingled with an odd note of turpentine. And then you hear it, the unmistakable thump of something hollow hitting the floor above you, followed by a string of muttered curses delivered in a deep baritone with a northern lilt. That would be Colonel Innes, retired, decorated, and notoriously difficult, who arrived 3 nights ago with 1 suitcase, a wax lead, and a very strong opinion about chimney drafts. You haven't met him yet, but his presence is unmistakable. Wherever he goes, chairs scrape, firewood splits wrong, and someone ends up bruised emotionally, physically, or morally. He lives in room 4, the leg in room 5. That's not a joke. He actually stores it separately. Says he sleeps better knowing it's at attention, though some whisper it's just a prop, a test. A trap for thieves, or perhaps for maids with light fingers and even lighter morals. The wax leg itself is a marvel of 18th century prosthetic ambition, molded from candle stock, carved with soldierly precision, and painted the faintest shade of pink by a theater set artist who owed the colonel a debt. It creaks when lifted, squeals when cold, and once caught fire during a particularly heated political debate in the parlor. No lives were lost. Just a chair and several egos. He's not the only ex-soldier renting rooms here, but he's the loudest. The others limp quietly, dream loudly, and mutter names in their sleep no one recognizes anymore. This house has always been a haven for the battered and bruised, especially the ones who survived battles but lost everything else. Some bring medals, others bring phantom limbs. All of them bring stories, though few share them. The colonel, however, is not shy. At supper, he slaps the table and tells tales of Gibraltar, of cannonballs lodging in thighs, of battlefield romances too steamy for a chaplain's ears. Most of it's probably fiction. But no one interrupts, partly out of respect, mostly out of fear. His temper is legendary. His aim with a walking stick, even more so. Fringe detail? His leg isn't just decorative. It doubles as storage. A small compartment in the calf lined with velvet, oddly where he keeps emergency shillings, a snuff box, and once, allegedly, a love letter tied with blue ribbon. No one knows from whom. He claims it was from a French opera singer he saved during a siege. Others say it was from a barmaid in Kilkenny with a limp and an exceptional singing voice. Either way, it's there, and he polishes that leg like it's still part of him. With devotion, with care, with something close to longing. You pass his door after supper. It's ajar. The candlelight flickers across maps pinned to the wall and medals hung like bitter memories. And then you see it. The leg, resting in a chair, upright, regal, like it's hosting guests. There's a tumbler of brandy next to it. You don't linger. You've already seen too much. There's a reason war and boarding houses dance so well together. Both are built on waiting, on strategy, on who holds the high ground or the cleanest sheets. Many soldiers return to these places hoping for quiet and end up entangled in stories messier than any battlefield. Like the case of Sergeant McDonough, who moved in with his rifle and his regrets. He fell in love with a baker's daughter too. Rooms down, wooed her with nightly recitations of Latin military phrases which she believed were love poems, and ended up fathering twins before realizing she couldn't read. They lived in the attic for 2 months until her father showed up with a cleaver and a dowry. McDonough now teaches poetry in Belfast. And tonight's sex story, oh, it's a twist. A serving girl named Elsie with a clubfoot and a spine as straight as any general's. She worked at a boarding house in Galway known for its healing salts and rotating guests. One day, she began assisting an elderly officer with bathing. Nothing scandalous at first. But over time he started sharing stories, real ones. Ones that made her laugh, wince, sometimes cry. She wrote them down, secretly. Then she added her own chapters, and her own body. Their affair was quiet, almost sacred, until his wife arrived, unannounced, with a priest and a pistol. What followed is unclear. Some say she left. Others say she stayed, and the wife was the one run out. But Elsie published the officer's memoir under the pseudonym A Soldier's Shadow. It sold. She bought the boarding house. She still hires veterans. Colonel Innes, meanwhile, spends the rest of his evening polishing his medals and, some say, whispering to the leg. You don't listen at the door. You don't need to. In this house, some stories finish themselves. You smell the theater before you see it. Face powder, sweat, damp velvet, and that faint bite of cheap gin served in cracked goblets to women wearing borrowed pearls. You've wandered too close to Dublin's theater district, and your boarding house reflects it. The scent follows you through the entryway, where a pair of well-worn satin slippers have been abandoned like a hasty exit. Someone upstairs is rehearsing a monologue. Someone downstairs is reciting something more breathy and less scripted. Here, every second-floor tenant is either a performer, a patron, or a scandal waiting for intermission. You don't stay long without becoming part of the cast. You didn't mean to rent a room next to the stage door of a life unraveling in 5 acts, but here you are. The boarding houses closest to the theater don't just tolerate drama, they inhale it. Curtains are replaced weekly, not because they wear out, but because someone's torn them down mid-tryst or used them as a cape. The house you're in tonight has 3 failed playwrights, 2 semi-retired actresses, and 1 gentleman of indeterminate profession who wears rouge and sings Italian arias to his mirror at 3 a.m. You pass his room. It's locked, but a soprano note escapes. He pauses, as if aware of the audience, then continues louder. And this brings us to Miss Beatrice Lynn, known on stage as B. Lynn of the Long Eyes, and offstage as the reason half the men in Dublin can't walk straight. She's a tenant of the house, room 9, top floor. Her window overlooks a chimney and nothing else, but men line up in the alley below like pilgrims. Her presence in the boarding house is tolerated because she pays in cash, never sings out of tune, and once saved the landlady's dog from choking on a pork bone. She receives flowers daily, never the same type. Rumor has it she assigns meanings to them. Roses mean, try harder. Lily mean, too late. And daisies mean, I saw you with her last night. She has yet to explain the time she received. Cabbage leaves and laughed for an hour. You cross paths with her at breakfast. She wears a robe that makes no attempt to hide the fact that she's already been adored once today. She drinks coffee from a wine glass and reads her lines aloud between sips. When a man tries to make conversation, she silences him with a raised eyebrow and the single word, rehearsing. And just like that, he withers. Historians still argue whether these boarding houses near the theater district were dens of creativity or chaos. The truth? Usually both. These were homes for people between performances, between patrons, or between entirely different names. Actors lived under assumed identity so convincingly that even their mail didn't know who to address. One landlady famously gave up and labeled all the doors with numbers and moods. Room 5, tragic. Room 7, drunk. Room 3, possibly French. Fringe detail? Theater boarding houses often had line walls, thin partitions painted with script prompts or speech exercises. Tenants would rehearse by leaning against them, whispering sonnets into the woodwork. Over time, the paint absorbed so many soliloquies, it began to flake in iambic pentameter. One actor insisted he couldn't sleep unless the wall fed him his lines. Another accused the wallpaper of plagiarism. And the sex story tonight. Let's talk about Edward Smythe, a stagehand turned playwright turned cautionary tale. He rented a tiny attic room above a well-known actress whose name has been lost, but whose thighs were allegedly insured by a French duke. Edward fell in love, madly, loudly, inconveniently. He wrote an entire play about her, The Lady in the Violet Light, and slipped pages of it under her door nightly. She read them. She laughed. She invited him in. For weeks they rehearsed. Privately. She added lines, he removed clothing, and together they almost believed it could last. But then she performed the play with another actor. He watched from the third row, silently combusting. That night, he packed his things, left town, and was later spotted in Cork, managing a glove shop with a sign that read, "No drama sold here." The actress? She took the lead role to London. She renamed it The Man Who Wrote for Me. It ran for 8 nights. No encores. Back at the house, the evening heats up. Someone's opened a bottle of brandy and forgotten to close the piano. A tune wanders through the corridors, halting, improvised, possibly weeping. You hear voices rehearsing from the drawing room, not lines. Real arguments, real pain, or maybe just very good acting. In a place like this, who can tell? The landlady sweeps by muttering about missing rouge and broken hairpins. You step aside. As she passes, she doesn't see you. Or she does, but decides you're not worth the monologue tonight. You reach your room and find a program slipped under your door. No note, just a cast list. Your name isn't on it. But you know better than to believe that. In this boarding house, everyone's in the play. Even if you never speak your lines, you hear her before you see her. The slow, even footfalls that never rush, never hesitate. The clack of a boot with a custom heel. The faint chime of metal where no jewelry should be. And then she appears moving through the hallway like a ripple in certainty, chin tilted just enough to make the world seem below her, even if she's only 5'2" and worn leather shoes. The serving girl with the silver ear. Her name's Maura, or at least that's what she answers to. She doesn't smile often. When she does, it usually means someone's in trouble, or about to be. She's worked in the house longer than the paint's been peeling and has survived more scandals than the wallpaper. She doesn't gossip. She documents. And if the house has a memory, She's the one who keeps it sharpened beneath her pillow, her prosthetic ear crafted from molded, pewter and polished until it gleams like something ceremonial, isn't just cosmetic. It's a signal, a message. To every guest, she sees you, she hears you, and she will remember. She didn't always wear it. It came after an incident with a jealous tenant, a thrown plate, and a fire poker. The details change depending on who's telling the story, but the ending is always the same. She stitched her own wound, forged the replacement ear with the help of a retired tinsmith, and wore it to breakfast 2 days later like a medal. Number. One's crossed her since, at least not twice. She doesn't walk. She patrols. And in her apron pocket, folded so precisely it could be surgical, is a small leather-bound ledger one she consults at quiet moments, nodding to herself with a grim sort of amusement. You've seen her jot in it with ink the color of dried blood. Theories abound. Some say it's her own fiction. Some say it's a rent log. Others insist it's a record of every secret the house has ever whispered. And here's the part that makes your pulse tick faster. She caught you, didn't she? That time you lingered outside room 4. That evening you stood too long near the laundry line. She said nothing, she never does. But she looked, wrote, closed. The book. Tonight, she carries a tray with 3 empty glasses and a note you'd swear wasn't there a moment ago. She delivers them without knocking. No one refuses her. Not because they fear her, though some do, but because somewhere deep down, they think she's the house itself. The manifestation of its judgment. A walking confessional. A memory in boots. The landlady once said, half drunk on currant wine, that Mora was born of soot and scandal. She wasn't joking. There's a tale guests whisper after 2 drinks. And a closed curtain about a guest who tried to seduce her. A poet, obviously, said he was drawn to her mystery. She declined. Politely, at first. Then she offered to let him read a page from her ledger. He accepted, smug. She turned to a section marked in red ribbon, handed it over, and left the room. They say he left the house that night barefoot, coatless, eyes wild. Moved to a monastery. In Kildare, never published again. Fringe detail. Mora can pick locks with a corset pin. It's not rumor, you've seen it. Once, when someone jammed the pantry door and the pudding needed to be rescued, she sighed, produced the pin, twisted her wrist, and the lock clicked open like it owed her a favor. She didn't smile then either. Your encounter with her happens at dusk. You're in the hallway, pretending to admire a water-stained portrait of someone long forgotten, when she rounds the corner and pauses. The silver ear catches the last light of day. Her ledger is tucked under one arm. She nods at you. And for the briefest moment, something like a smile touches her mouth, but only briefly. Then she's gone, and you're left wondering what page. Your name lives on. Tonight's sex story has less velvet and more vengeance. Let's talk about Nora Mullen, another serving girl, this one from Cork, who worked her way through 3 boarding houses by the age of 20. She wasn't pretty in the usual sense, but she had something more dangerous: timing. She could predict desire like weather. Knew when to linger in a doorway, knew when to drop a glove. Her reputation traveled faster than she did. In one house, she seduced a newlywed husband, then his wife, then introduced them both to each other's letters. The fallout was so operatic that the entire house shut down for a week to recover. She was gone by morning, of course. Some say she left with a magistrate. Others say she left dressed as one. You sit in your room tonight and reread the notes you've taken. Half memories, half maybes. You wonder if Mora's ledger is fuller than yours. It must be. She's been watching longer. The shadows lengthen. A breeze whistles through the chimney. Somewhere below, someone drops a glass and no one reacts. In this house, noise means life. Silence means decision. And Mora? She never needs to raise her voice. You don't hear the magistrate arrive, you feel it. The boarding house shifts subtly, like a stage waiting for the curtain to rise. Voices lower. Chairs scrape backward just a little faster. Even the teapot trembles when set down. He isn't famous, not exactly, but he's the sort of man whose reputation precedes him like thunder before a storm. Judge Tierney. He's here on business, allegedly. Some matter of inheritance or fraud. No one's sure. No one asks. He walks like a man who's always being watched and finds it flattering. Tall, stiff-backed, with a mustache that could indict. On its own, he carries a walking stick with a silver fox head and a travel bag made of crocodile skin reel, or so he claims. He takes room too. He doesn't smile. The house holds its breath for a day and a half. Then it begins. The flirtations. The accidents. The feigned requests for legal advice that conveniently require him to look over a corset or two. And through it all, the magistrate remains utterly unmoved until the night he gets stuck in the lavatory. Not metaphorically, physically. It's a small room with a stubborn latch and an even more stubborn plumbing system. A converted closet near the stairwell with just enough space to sit, regret, and reflect on your choices. He's in there for nearly an hour. No one helps. Not immediately. Not because they don't hear him, but because everyone in the house collectively decides to let the moment simmer. It's Mora, of course, who finally opens the door. With a hairpin. And an expression that says, without words, I could have done this an hour ago. I chose not to. He exits red-faced, muttering about building codes, and retreats to his room without his dignity or his walking stick. It's passed around the drawing room for inspection. Someone ties a ribbon on it. When it's returned, it has teeth marks. After that, something shifts. The house exhales. The power dynamic realigns. The magistrate no longer looms. He lingers. He makes small talk with the widows. He compliments the stew. He even, disastrously, attempts to join a card game. He loses spectacularly. The dandy from room 6 accuses him of cheating. No one defends him. He folds. And then, as if to underline the absurdity, the drains back up. All of them. Chamber pots are suddenly more than symbolic. Water rises where it should not. The house floods in reverse. The servants move fast pans, towels, borrowed buckets from neighbors. It's chaos. Wet, pungent, comedic chaos. And through it all, the guests pretend everything is fine. That their slippers aren't soaked. That their letters aren't floating down the corridor. That a pair of someone's drawers haven't become tangled in the banister like a surrender flag. Historians still argue whether this plumbing collapse was due to age, sabotage, or cosmic retribution. But there's a theory, whispered only by those who've scrubbed floorboards at dawn, that Mora did it. That she removed a stopper or planted something in the pipe. Not out of cruelty, but as a reminder. That even judges answer to water. That a boarding house, for all its rented respectability, is still a body. And every body has a limit. The fringe detail? The house's original blueprints, long thought lost, were discovered behind a bookshelf after the flood. Water damaged, barely legible, but real. They revealed that the building was once a tailor shop, then a brothel, then briefly a naval recruitment office. Which explains a lot, really. The odd wall angles, the strange acoustics. The tiny locked drawer in the wainscoting where someone once found a wedding ring, a corkscrew, and a pawn ticket for a violin. And now, the final sex story. Fittingly, a tangle of lies, love, and law. Years ago, long before you ever set foot here, a tenant named Lydia seduced a judge not Tierney, an earlier one, with the aim of securing a lighter sentence for her brother, who had stolen a carriage. While drunk and attempted to ride it to America. She succeeded. The brother was fined, not jailed, but the judge returned. Again and again. Lydia kept records, names, visits, promises, and when he tried to deny her, she sent the ledger to his wife. No scandal followed, the wife invited Lydia to tea. And later, when the judge died suddenly of exhaustion, Lydia received a sealed envelope containing a deed to a small plot of land and a note that simply read, "For services rendered." She sold the land, bought this house, rented it to people with secrets, including you. You lie awake that night with your door bolted and your boots tucked safely beside your bed. Outside, the air smells of wet wood and lavender soap. The magistrate has checked out quietly. His room is already being dusted. The drain is fixed. The notes on the laundry line flutter again, as if nothing ever happened. You wonder what Mara wrote about this day. Probably just one line. The law was humbled. The linens held. And now, as the house quiets, you hear the distant sound of the piano again. A slow, thoughtful tune, played by someone who doesn't care if anyone listens, and maybe that's the point. Some houses are built from brick, others from memory. This one is held together by scandal, silence, and the sound of late-night music leaking through the walls. The storm has passed, though the sky's never quite clear in this part of the world. The candle by your bedside guttered out hours ago, leaving just the amber hush of moonlight slipping through moth-bitten curtains. Your body sinks deeper into the mattress. The springs finally quiet. The noises of the house reduce to soft sighs of old wood and distant sleep. It's easy now to imagine the walls breathing, each beam exhaling the weight of another secret, kept for one more night. The house is still almost but never empty. Somewhere below, the kettle hisses gently, forgotten on the hob. In the hallway, a slipper slides as someone shuffles back from a too-long conversation. You don't open. Your eyes, you know the rhythm now. The scandal has quieted, but it hasn't ended. It never does. It just settles into the walls, waiting. Your thoughts drift, slower now, each one heavier than the last, like stones sinking into the bottom of a pond. The gossip, the lovers, the notes tucked in laundry folds, they blur into warmth and shadow. Sleep takes your hand not as a thief, but a lover, soft, familiar, and deeply overdue. End of script. Sweet dreams.